Yes, sir, Mr. DeMille.
Thank you for joining today. We have a great panel coming up. It's actually kind of a fireside chat, right? With Bryan Hurd and Richard Rushing. They're going to be talking about threats, breaches. And so Bryan is over VP at Stroz Friedberg, former intelligence director, Microsoft Digital Crimes Unit, and Richard Rushing, longtime CISO at Motorola Mobility. So thanks for joining, guys. I'll stop sharing the screen and let you come up and take the reins.
Awesome. Thank you very much, John, and thanks everybody for taking time out on both a Friday and a Saturday to be at CornCon. My name's Bryan Hurd. Currently am the Chief of Office of Seattle for Stroz Friedberg. Some of you may know the brand, may not. We're the people Facebook hired for Cambridge Analytica, as well as a lot of the other breaches you read about were usually brought in under counsel. And we're owned by a company called Aon, an international insurance company. The final thought on that, and then we'll get into introducing Richard in the panel, is the reason I joined an insurance company, for those of you that are new to the CISO community, is because just like seatbelts mid-century and adjustments to steam boilers around 120 years ago, insurance companies drive architecture to keep the costs of problems, explosions, and crashes down. And they'll be doing the same in cyber. So while for many of us for 30 years, we picked or built our own technologies, soon it will be the insurance companies that will have reference architectures or technological references because they're doing longitudinal math. That'll change our field quite a bit, and you'll see the chief legal officers and chief risk officers potentially having more inputs about technology selection. So be on the lookout for that, but there are a lot of great technologies and a lot of great best practices. Today, Richard Rushing, CISO of Motorola Mobility, and I are going to be doing a back and forth on the breaches of today. We're going to go over some areas like just the current threat environment, but a lot of you know it. We're just going to bring some senior looks at that. We're then going to look at kind of the response team from Richard's perspective internally. And then I often leave what I call the cyber smoke jumpers that are called in by some of the world's largest enterprises and join that internal team and the legal team and the outside counsel on mega breaches. And then we're going to kind of finish up with what can be done. Interactive is welcome. Please do post questions or issues into the chat as we're going. Richard and I both have done a couple of these, so we're quite willing to adjust for the needs of the audience and follow where the spirit may lead us. Over to you, Richard, for an intro, and then I'll queue up a couple questions about the current threat environment.
Sure, thanks, Bryan. No, it's a pleasure. Thank you, John, for the invitation. As a longtime CornCon goer, as well as lots of fun, and we've all traveled in relatively the same small circles, so it's good to get together virtually. My name is Richard Rushing. I'm CISO for Motorola Mobility. I've been CISO now going on 14 years, which I should have died like 5 or 6 times according to the CISO life expectancy for organizations. I seem to just keep alive. I don't read into that if I'm some small cockroach or something like that. I just know where bodies are buried for the most part of it. I've been in technology. I've been doing this pretty much all my life. I don't have gray hair yet, but I have a gray beard. So I think that just kind of goes to the stress levels. That's why it's usually shaved on that side of it that's there. I do love the topics that we're talking about. I think that's a critical area that we see a lot of organizations kind of struggling with. And as we've come out in this before where we've said, hey, it's not if, but when. And I think that's very, very true. And it's no longer if and when. It's kind of like, it's probably going on as we speak in a lot of organizations that's there. You saw articles as there's several conferences around the world going on where you've had APT groups that have gone undetected for 9, 10 years that are just coming into play. You have all these different areas where people were taking advantage, monetizing, doing different things to not only companies and organizations, but everyone's accounts and things around that nature. So I think this is a timely topic, and I look forward to chatting with everybody.
Got it. Thanks, Richard. To set up, Richard at his one position, and I've been in the community since 1993. For those of you a little younger, that was before the 2000s. I founded the program at Naval Criminal Investigative Service. So we were hunting APTs back in the early 90s, and that's before the web actually existed. It came into existence around 94, 95. But what I will tell you is a lot of the really good APTs have learned how to stay resident inside a target for years, slowly stealing and siphoning information. Now, those are nation state APTs looking to do intelligence collection. The loud, brash Russian ransomware people will not linger for months. They will get in a period of now, sometimes less than 7 days, from first phishing email to $10 million ransom. We've seen the ransoms. $5 million and $10 million are not uncommon. I've worked cases, 21 million, and hold your hats, $72 million ransom for a Fortune 50 company. I personally believe this is becoming, and I'm not picking this term lightly, a clear and present danger. So I'm going to cue up, Richard, what we talked about to prep for this was, this is no longer the perception of mano a mano of a CISO versus a hacker. In fact, that term needs to go away at some point, because this is no longer hackers. It is not hacker groups. It is not even organized crime groups. It is what I personally call an ecosystem of evil at the $1 trillion level. This is an economy of bad behavior. There are whole groups that just do the phishing. Once you're hooked, there are whole groups that do the exploitation, and then they hand you off to another group or sell you on a market for the people to do the ransom negotiations and collections. So Richard, you're right, 14 years in one organization, especially when mobile communications are a target of every adversary. If I want to know where a president or an M&A team are, I want to know everything about somebody, I'm looking to get their phone. So what kind of trends have you seen in threat over the 14 years? And what are you seeing in terms of, like you said, it's now not periodic, it's ever present?
Yeah, no, it's, as you pointed out, it's an ecosystem of evil, and it's also an evolution of evil that's there. Because the goal sets for a lot of the attackers are varied. It could be, I'm looking for intellectual property, I'm looking for money, I'm looking for connections to other entities as well that you have. It could be you're part of a bigger contract base that people are looking at, et cetera, with that. And I think that's one of the key areas that a lot of times things pop up and disappear at the same time. And that evolution has gone from I'll customize, write my own tool sets, because that used to be the way we would find them. You wouldn't find the actors, you would find the artifacts that were scattered, and then the actors were actually there. They weren't really cleaned up after themselves. I remember in occasions of decrypting their communication channels that were there. And when you looked at it, you discovered that you had what we referred to as like the A team, the B team, the C team. As Bryan pointed out, it's their job is a specific role, maybe compromise accounts, move laterally, and then after they're done, they turn that over to somebody else. And they continue, but they always have had really good intelligence. They knew where things typically were. They knew accounts that needed to be compromised. They weren't guessing. on those. So the threats have gone from those sides of it. You always still have the smash and grabs, the guys that they do the equivalent of take a brick, throw it through the window, empty to the jewelry store out before the police come and run off. And those are still relatively common, but now just given the quantity of breaches across the environment, I can now look and say, hey, here's all the people that I'm looking for. Here's potentially the passwords. And now I have a whole set of a target-rich environment to say, okay, these people, I can go after them and see what's happened. Sometimes they're looking for vulnerabilities. Sometimes they're looking through accounts. A lot of times they look at some of the other stuff. One thing that's always fascinated me, they've always been like access control. They're trying to blend in a lot of cases. So a lot of times they will go out and steal authentication and tokens off of machines for software side of it, or look to bypass MFA in some of the cases that were there, because they want to use VPN. They want to use your common access points that get in. So they look like somebody else. They pretend to be someone else that's there. They find quickly things like your help desk account, your desktop support accounts, your deployment accounts, and they look for those things. They go, no one's going to look bad at this, of this doing something malicious or evil. It's just, oh, this is IT, this is something else. So they really try to blend in, and they really try to hard, from rootkits being deployed onto the devices so that you can't see anything. Even if you have logging turned on to the 9th degree, it's magically not logging the details for their applications and things like that, to the point of, hey, this one little vulnerability of this one application that you're using will leverage that and go across the systems that are actually there. And I think it goes back to, the attackers continually kind of move the ball forward. And you have to move your structure very forward as well. Because sometimes it's like, I don't have the visibility. I don't have some of the functions. You see it with the emergence of tools like EDR and things like that. It's like, well, we didn't get enough logging from the endpoint to be able to actually see what's going on. And so I require some additional capabilities that are there. But the idea behind the attackers are there, and Bryan pointed out, they're there, they want to stay there, they want to stay hidden. Because each time there's a compromise, it's kind of a reset. It's like, okay, now this goes back to the C team. I'm the A team, and they have to go now get these functions and get this levels of control that are there. And for another side of it, you're also kind of, I want to say, on your own in a lot of cases that are there. Because a lot of times there's not a lot of communication that says, hey, adversaries are looking at this, or here's the technique, or here is the IoCs for that adversary. You notice that when people are publishing the IoCs, it's for something that happened in 2017. You're like,
so that's an important point about IoCs. Somebody was the 0 day to find the IoC. So you may have the distinction of being the person that finds the IoC that warns the rest of us. Relying on that is a trailing indicator. IoCs are not proactive. They're only proactive for numbers 2 through 100 a victim.
Yeah, and the IoCs you may get may just be for you. And the IoCs that are published are completely different. The IP address ranges they're using, the servers they're using, the techniques. So they vary their attacks depending on their timing, depending on the tools. They retool. A lot of people don't realize that usually it's like when I'm trying to attack, when the C team gives it over to the B team, they will strip and remove and install new sets of tools, because each time of that, think about it, is like, if I start looking for one, then it's cut off. And then well, where did they go? What happened to them? Did they pivot? Did they do something else? I have to find that next hop, and I have to find the next hop and the next hop. And the idea is that just as we do password changing every 60 days, it's not because like the reason you've change your password, if someone has your password, it's only good for those period of time. and then I change it to something else and it's good. And then that password would no longer work. That's the same way that they feel that if I change up my software and I change up my tool set, you're going to have to either catch it or you're going to actually have to see the move and follow it. And a lot of times you talk to people that investigate this, it's dead ends. You run into a point and you're like, it's a dead end. We don't know what happened. They just disappeared. Or they stopped. They must have got what they wanted.
So, and to put that historically, for those who haven't heard of it, there's an investigation in the olden days, and Richard and John will remember this, Moonlight Maze. So what most people don't know, and a blogger tracked me down 2 years ago, I wrote the national report for Moonlight Maze. I was the Navy's lead investigator at NCIS for that, and briefed the Secretary of Defense. But in this case, to reflect back on how the threat has changed, we had adversaries where they stopped working for 2 days, and it was a guy at DIA. His name has not been released yet, so I'll leave it out. But we looked at a calendar together and figured out it was a Russian Orthodox holiday. Now everybody's like, oh yeah, everybody does that, like Mandia. Yeah, ask Kevin where he got the idea. He's an old buddy. So we had an adversary, and suddenly he would know Unix perfectly on Monday. About halfway through the day, he really wouldn't. And then he'd go away for 45 minutes. We were able to fingerprint 2 distinct hackers of, what is published, Russian hackers, hacking through our system, stealing information about these things. But with this axis of evil, this ecosystem of evil, the people that are doing one component won't do the other. And as Richard's saying, they're frequency hopping. In the olden days, they didn't have the ability, even at the national level, to move IPs all around the world, the bulletproof servers, all the things we know exist. These groups know that. They will roll up a set of infrastructure just to go after a bank, just to go after a manufacturer for a $10 million ransom. That it's worth it to them. Low overhead, high profit, they'll do it again. Yeah. So infrastructure and IoCs, the other thing these groups have are huge labs filled with every single AV tool. They have their own Tinker lab. If the bell goes off, they won't launch this tool. They're doing all of that. They're using a lot of in-memory attacks. So that's the kind of change in the infrastructure of who's attacking us. What I want to do is to keep on our track is I want to move over, Richard, to talk a little bit about what your internal team looks like, how you take this glut of information about logins. It used to be that it was so easy. If you saw logins to your system from Nigeria, it's a problem. Now it's a factory. So Richard has factories, and not to pick on Motorola, a great company, whatever. You guys have factories in all the places we normally would consider suspect IP ranges. So you're placed, and you're getting your supply chain from all over the planet for the precious metals and everything. How does your internal team handle events and alerts? And then how does it bubble up to become an enterprise incident? And then I'll talk about how the external team engages. Yeah, over to you, sir.
No, I think it's a really good thing, because I would love to say that we see these at the side of it, and we can see the Titanic coming towards the iceberg well in advance to turn the ship and move somewhere else. But the reality for everybody else is a lot of times you are looking at things that don't fit. Again, these attackers don't necessarily work in these environments. And this pulls down into the offshoot of insider threat as portions of this, as even as a ransomware, as a model now, where, hey, if I can get you to plug this USB key in, we'll take control of that. And oh yeah, by the way, we'll give you a couple $1 million for just doing that. So that's another ecosystem that's there. That's like, great, now I have to worry about that. But in our case, a lot of times you'll touch on something that's not right. An employee wouldn't do that. An employee is not doing that. There's no correlation of a accounting person ever talking to an engineer person kind of scenario. So certain things will trip over that. We have, and you call them TTPs, the tactics of the groups, and we can see what's actually going. But like part of the ecosystem that's there is they will go up and they'll take over through like everything from like a WordPress compromise to something else. They will go out and take over 1,500 servers and then slice those up between their attack base and says, these for the command and control for this organization, these for the command and control for this organization. So even if you find a couple of things, I only end up with somewhere around maybe 30 or 40 of these that may be known bad. The rest of them are just look good still, because they don't have it. And so it's really hard to go, hey, this traffic that's going to this IP address may be suspect and things like that. And they mimic the traffic now. They send it as, it used to be, hey, we send it as HTTP and it looks flawless. And they use, and a lot of people don't understand, they use things like what we used to refer to as port knockers and things like that, where it's like, hey, it comes to a normal site and the URL is obfuscated or something like that, which now is part of the puzzle. But they also slice that up and say, well, no, we'll just use HTTP, we'll use normal headers. Before it was like, what sends 21 bytes in an HTTP packet? Nothing, never did. Big. So something's up with that. And so some of the volumes and some of the stuff for the sidereal period between the beacons comes up. There's all these little things that may come up, but those are not what usually trips you off. Something, I refer to it as walking around in the dark. Because you stub your toe, you trip over something, and then it's like, this is not really correct, and this is not really right, and there's no reason for that. You have to do investigations. The problem is sometimes now the actors know that you're going to investigate them. So how better to clear their tracks than, oh, let me go get an old piece of malware that I know will get found on every single antivirus that's on the thing, and I'll load it on your system. Oh, it's an old remote access Trojan from 2013. And you're like, oh my gosh, well, what's our standard procedure when you get that? Oh, we'll just re-image the machine because we don't know what else happened to it. So flash it, get rid of it, reformat it, load a new image on. And well, you solved the problem. The attacker's no longer on there, but you also erased all the forensic data that's actually there. So they're good at manipulating you without you thinking about them actually manipulating you in that process. And they know that they have a huge team and you relatively to them are a much smaller team, so they can exhaust you. They will literally, they're like, okay, you have 286 servers that you have to take forensic images on to figure out what actually happened. And there's not an organization that's going to be like, yeah, I've got 286 people that in 24 hours, I can give each person a machine and I will get a detailed forensic malware reverse detailed report of exactly what happened. Doesn't exist in any organization.
Well, one small note, I deploy teams that do some of that, but you're right, even I don't have 246 people. So couple of observations, then we have one question from the audience. And I'll talk about the deploying teams in a minute. So the question came up from Hannah in the audience, and also I do want to do a shout out, Win Schwartau, father of InfoWar. I saw him not only speaking earlier, but actually lurking on our chat. I'm honored. For those of you who didn't see it, go check out Win's recording. He's been in the mix since before it was cool. So thanks, Win. Good to at least see you one way. So for Hannah, the question was on threat intelligence. What do we do about threat intelligence? So there's a couple of layers of it because I want to differentiate the news, weather, and sports IOC threat intelligence from real damn threat intelligence. And Richard, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Is that like we got fake IOCs now? I think that's a new area.
So yeah, couple of quick hits. The IOCs that are all over the planet are a lagging indicator. Those are people that were victimized last month, last year, whatever. And if somebody's coming at you like they would at a Motorola, like they would at a bank, like they would if they're just trying to take money from you, yeah, the doorknob knocking or like walking through a parking lot looking for unlocked cars, yeah, all that stuff's great threat intel, fine. The adversaries are putting fake information into those channels to give you false positive fatigue. That is a lot different than all source fusion about having
Companies, there are many of them. Mine happens to be one, but there are a bunch of them. Data miners, a great company for physicals and other threats. 4IQ, Stroz, Friedberg does it too, just so I don't get in trouble with my own, not repping my own brand. But there are a lot of great companies, but that's a focused threat intelligence looking for dark web, talking about abusing your loyalty programs, how to you know, jack the SIM cards on a Motorola, or how to get through the App Store. Those kind of abuses are not IoCs. And one final thing, if you're getting IoCs and they're not in some way automatically integrating into your system, you're just reading a very badly formatted newspaper. So if you're reading your threat intel and it's not actioning into sticks, taxi, and other things that make your life easy, consider automation, because you're probably behind the power curve, and your investigator having those IoCs to query after an event is not really the purpose of that part of threat intel.
Yeah.
So over to you for threat intel, and then we'll talk about when you pop smoke and I jump in.
So this is actually a real timely thing. If you saw late last week or something, you had CISA come out with a new APT actor on that side. There was 39 and 41. Everybody calls all these things. You need, first part of threat intel, you need the Rosetta Stone to actually figure out who the bad guys actually are, and why are there kittens? Why are there kittens on the system? Why would kitties try to attack the thing? Are they getting more cat videos? I don't understand. Or why are these pandas running amok? Yeah, everybody calls things flowers, pandas, colors. It doesn't matter. Once you get the decoder ring, you can go. But this is a really good example. At the end of the report, they listed all the IOCs. Here's the hashes, here's the IP addresses and everything else. But the detailed report, and this is where the problem with IOCs is, like, they're so unique to organizations and everything else that you don't get an insight into it. But in the report itself, they told you, here is the registry hive that they are actually storing these things in for persistence. Here are the registry entries that they're doing. Here is the DLL that they're actually using to sideload their particular malware and everything else. But those are never in the IOC reports. You really have to curate IOCs to your own environment, and taking those registry entries and going, let me search across my enterprise and see if anything has those registries entries in that is the stage. So if you look at the IOCs, they're the tip of the iceberg that's there. You really have to make the threat intel useful, you need to be curating your own threat intel. So taking that information in, taking what is going to be unique to the organization. It's like, it's a step up into the thing. It's like, because they aren't using the same hash. They're using a completely different file that's there. Now, they may not change this, and this is one of those things. To be able to do the quantity of work they do, they're highly, highly, highly automated. So if you think about automation in a way, there are certain things, if I'm building cars, I can't say, hey, guess what? I'm going to change the windshield on this one. I'm going to change the door on this one. No, it has to fit in that area. So I can't make those changes. So those registry entries, the file name may change, but you know what? The file size doesn't change with that. So you can get some of those IOCs that say, I don't want to look for the file. I just want to look for files that have this extension, or the file name is alpha character, numeric, numeric, alpha character, numeric, numeric. And it's all the same. The numbers change. The other stuff does. They use a hash value to pull off the ID and create their own. All you need is the lexicon to be able to move that. And I think using that threat intel to develop your own threat intel for your organization is how you successfully do it. If you're just scanning and looking for hashes, you're like, I don't see anybody. That's a good thing. And it's like, you're never going to see anybody, because that was a bank. You are a insurance organization, or you're a manufacturing organization, completely different hashes that are going to be used and probably unique to your own organization.
Agreed. And now, as we crest into the 11 o'clock, so we got about 5 minutes, let's talk about, how to pop smoke and call in a cyber smoke jumper team. And then we'll open it up to questions, or I'll give you the floor for a final war story. So you've done everything you can. You've escalated up. You suddenly realize somebody's inside the fence line, Now, the other thing about ransomware, for those of you that feel good about your backups, having good backups is no longer qualifies you to get out of this. They exfiltrate data first and they will still extort you. Now, what you are going to reduce is your business interruption, your downtime, your third-party liability, and a bunch of other things, but you're still going to be extorted. So, you know, gear up for that, depending on what they stole. And your ability to figure out what they stole and whether it's worth $10 million in embarrassment is a real good thing to be doing a damage assessment. So you get to that point. You've gone to, you're the CISO, you've gone to the CIO, you've talked now to the general counsel. There's a problem. You pick up the phone and it rings. And again, I'm not talking about Motorola, but in general, rings somebody middle of the night, usually on a Sunday morning on a 3-day weekend or a Friday afternoon. And by the way, to Hannah, I think that's because threat analysts try and clear their desk on a Friday afternoon and find all the Tuesday alerts. But I'll digress on why they're screwing up my Friday.
Never hunt on Fridays, unless you don't want a weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Find something.
Yeah, or when you don't hunt on Friday, that's when it happens Sunday morning. Then, you know, the issue becomes the CISO, to a degree, loses control of the response. The general counsel calls an outside counsel. The outside counsel hires Stroz, Friedberg, Mandiant, FireEye, Kivu. Just want to be fair play for those of you who come to these conferences. Win, myself, Richard. We love hate every other company we don't work for, so it's all good. Just make sure you're picking a good one. Don't cheap out on your heart surgeon. They bring in a company like that. What's that like as a CISO when suddenly your team doubles, triples, or quadruples, but it's matrix managed, and you've got now 2 lawyers between you and somebody with a wrench?
Yeah, no, and you have to do it. And in some of the cases, you may be dealing with partnerships, because we've done a lot of work with one of your former employees that you were working with as a side of it, because they are finding things that say, hey, do you know about this? Have you seen this? We want to work with you and partner with you, and the partnerships work. We put people in jail on those sides of it that's there. So it does down to the stuff that, yeah, you see these levels of stuff from a digital crime side of it. But I think it's one of the things to understand that it's really hard to have everyone in your organization or in your team that you're going to have a full start to finish with the capabilities that you need, because you don't have that in almost any organization. You're fine. It's like, oh, great. We have a digital forensic person that's super good. I have a malware reversing person that's super good. That's great. Oh, great. This was built on this was a Golang version of malware versus a Python version. Well, I've never.
Oh, hey, Richard, so I got a call the other day. A client had malware on one of their systems. It was Conficker. The operating system was Windows 95. It was a manufacturer still making sensor devices for the Department of Defense. They've been making them for 30 years. And I was talking to our senior most forensics person in Stroz, Friedberg. And I said, well, we need somebody to go up and help them with this. And he goes, oh, we'll send so-and-so. I'm like, we can't. He goes, why not? They're really good. I said, they're only 30 years old. They've never seen the operating system. And I said, he goes, oh no. And I'm like, guess who gets to get on a plane? So the oldest guy on our team had to go take care of the thing because the operating system had not actually been seen in the wild in 25 years. Yeah. And so another guy on the call, another old guy, he held up the install disk and I'm like, hold on to that, we might need it. So some of these organizations, when you look at augmenting your team in this emergency situation, you might have a malware reversal. Let me ask you a question. How many malware are they reversing a year that are actively hitting other organizations? Probably pretty few. They work for you. How many different operating systems? Like even my best people specialize in operating systems. It's okay to, and this is a CISO general. It's not about calling me. Yeah. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to bring in somebody for a mechanical Turk job and get it done right. Anybody can Google their way through it. That's not going to be cost effective.
It's not cost effective. Two, you don't get the answer and you get something stupid at the end. They go, oh, it was infected with a run-of-the-mill version of malware. And yeah, yeah, we've seen it, but why is it only on these 10 VPs PCs? This seems really strange. And those are the things you definitely don't want to get into, but you need help. It's a niche that we don't have, and even if you did have, we see it time and time again where it's like, yeah, I'm a PC guy. Oh, well, this is a Mac malware. Right. I'm lost at that point in time. So you do need help in some of the areas that are there. You also, if you're a global company, this is not going to happen anywhere near where there is either an IT person or there's another person. It never happens. And oh yeah, by the way, your connection is like a sippy straw trying to suck bandwidth through. So a lot of times, to your point, is like we get on planes. Why? Because it's so much faster than trying to do things remotely and everything else.
Well, I just worked an insider threat case. So a couple other types of cases besides the evil external hacker. One employee is harassing another employee. Now you're in a sexual harassment investigation or an equal opportunity investigation. You definitely want somebody outside the organization handling that. The tale of woe, I'll tell you, is a friend of mine, Richard. He was a CISO for 6 years, doing great. He would have made 14. But the guy he investigated that was harassing another employee and that was not fired was appointed to the CIO in his 6th year. And anywho. So
the loveliness of investigations. You never know who you might end up with. And sometimes you just don't want to know.
And they might get promoted above you after you've done the investigation a couple years and they won't forget. Yeah. So I'm gonna pause us there. I'm gonna do a one quick question out to the group. I know we have a lot of CISOs from government and commercial that have attended this session, and again, Father Wynn himself, another not tip of the cap. If there's any questions for Richard and I to close out on, or Richard, what I'll ask you as a closing thought, as we're waiting to see if a question or two come in, is what's next? Everybody moved to remote. We're all just figuring that out. We're all trying to figure out the phishing scams for COVID. Yeah. But as you look to the next year out, we're going to get through whatever kind of election this is and whatever the consternation of that is, and hopefully get back to some kind of semblance of normalcy in America. What do you see as the next big wave for CISOs?
Wow. More pain and suffering, unfortunately. I think I wish I had good positive things. It's 2020. I'm like 2021. It's got to be better than 2020. Yeah, for a lot of things, but not necessarily for cybersecurity, because we see this ransomware item that came and started with something really, really small, and it's progressed into now it is a huge money-making kind of thing. We deal with super complex environments. Complexity is a killer for us. There's so many things. Just think about it. Before, when we were doing stuff, I went to an AD server, got the logs, and I can tell you everything that went on for logging and everything else. Now with MFA and using third parties and everything else, now I got to go talk to Microsoft and Google and here and here and here just to accumulate the pieces of data. And that's all in taking time, and you can quantify it, put AI, ML, whatever buzzword you want to, and at the end of the day, you just end up with anomalies bubbling up to the top, and you're like, well, this doesn't explain anything. It's strange.
So this goes to a question that Wynn Schwartall, to the benefit of the audience, just posted in, is the average, and I'll quote a stat that Wynn didn't have, but the average CISO has somewhere around, especially at a company size Motorola, about 150 to 200 technologies that you're looking at across the waterfront. What are some of the simplification things that you're excited about? Now, one I'll proffer up is, full disclosure, I was the chief of cybercrime intelligence for all of Microsoft. What I'm seeing among all of the cloud vendors, again, to be polite, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, even Oracle to a degree, they're incorporating anti-phishing and other things into the cloud platform. So they are normalizing some of that complexity. What other areas like firewalls and WAF are you seeing convergence in where you're able to get rid of some of the complexity? And great question, Win.
Yeah, no, I think the complexities are now coming down. And I look at it from a couple of things. One, if I actually am able to knock down things, my noise level drops. So what I'm actually looking at now is, for lack of a better term, clean internet, or some of the other level. I'm actually not seeing the things, my firewalls are not getting brute forced all day long, or other areas. And that's a huge inkling of, okay, if I can get rid of the noise, I don't have to spend 20 minutes figuring out that this is just some script kiddie running some brute force attempt and going away. And away. I think as we move into the world of distribution and segmentation, and the idea that it's no longer hardware. In other words, hey, I can't get a piece of hardware. I need to put a sensor here. We used to do Armon sensors. And
yeah,
this goes all the way back. Oh, you need something local on the network to actually tell what the hell the network's doing.
How many span ports do you have left? Yeah, I remember.
So, but now with the world of VMs and everything else, it's a box and I can stick it on there, and I can see everything that's on a manufacturing segment, a lab segment, or anything else that's flowing around, which now gives me more insight into didn't hit here, didn't hit here. It's like a house with a bunch of doors. If the doors are locked, guess what? It didn't go through. So that now I know where whatever the rodent or the mouse, the panda, the kitten stuck into my house at. And I'm like, he's over here and he's not moved anywhere else in the world. So you get some visibility. People looking at the visibility, I think, is key. One of the other key elements, I think, is we now give respect to the endpoints. Before, the endpoints were like, it's just a PC, it doesn't matter anymore. Now we're putting a lot of telemetry on the PC and seeing what the PC does, because at the end of the day, and it's an interesting aspect of that from an investigation point of view, is it the person or is it the PC that has something on it that is pretending to be the person that's actually doing the dirty work that's there?
Absolutely. And with that thought, I'm going to go to a close thanks to a little nudge and a small hook from John. One, to the entire audience, thank you. Two, a public service announcement. Mergers and acquisitions. The adversaries are timing and attacking either the acquiring company to ride it into a merger, or afterwards they figure it's the weak link in the Motorola chain or anybody's chain after you've acquired them. And believe me, for the mega breaches I worked this year, that's accurate. So for myself, for John Johnson and Richard, over to you to say goodbye. Thank you everybody for attending the session. Please reach out on LinkedIn or other venues and let John know if this was useful in your time. Really appreciate it. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks. Great opportunity, great questions and everything else. I'll briefly touch on Wynn's question as a no nudge. IoT world is getting better. It's still back to parts of the issues, just like everything else. It's still new, but every single problem that we've seen, we've come up with solutions that will wrap over the top of IoT in the not so distant future. And I think that we've solved a lot of things. We've been doing this, in my case, 35 years, and a lot of other people. And it's a bad disconnection because we keep seeing the same problems we've had. And the same 35 years ago is the same bucket. I can go get my rainbow books.
Confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Yeah, it's still today the same thing. So it's not the way it's not. It's just the attackers are getting there. And I think that is the critical thing, is like, it's not those issues. And you brought into the thing that we talked about today. You have technology, process, and people. We've been working on technology. We started working on people. That process thing that no one wants to touch is the next area which gets...
It is, and the two thoughts on IoT. One, network segmentation is a lot easier in software-defined networks or by using things like Guardicore or radical segmentation. Two, We need to learn how to protect the business process that rides on the computers, not the computers. But now we truly are out of time, and John's going to turn on my ankle taser if I don't shut up.
He tases my computer, so it's okay.
I can only go 50 feet. Thank you again, everybody. And John, thank you. And Wynn, talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.